powerful politicians. In the wake of Lucchese's death, confusion surrounded his successor. Tommy had never officially named an heir to the family throne. In his absence, bosses of the other mafia families met and chose the next boss, Tommy's former protege, Tony Ducks Corallo. One problem: Corallo was serving the last few years of an extortion charge. In the interim, the families asked Carmine Tramunti to step in and maintain Tommy's rackets. Following in the footsteps of Tommy Lucchese, Corallo's men set up rackets at John F. Kennedy Airport. In 1978, Lucchese crime family associates staged an incredible robbery at the Lufthansa Airlines cargo terminal. They made off with $6 million in cash. At the time, the Lufthansa heist was considered the biggest robbery in American history. It wasn't until the 1980s that the feds were finally able to get to the top leadership of the Lucchese crime family through electronic surveillance. A bug planted in Corallo's car recorded more than 70 hours of incriminating conversations. Federal prosecutor Rudy Giuliani, the future mayor of New York, used the tapes to go after the city's 5 families.
He indicted all of the administrations of the 5 families, as well as the underbosses and conciliaries and captains, or whoever he could sweep into this indictment.
In all, 6 high-ranking mobsters received convictions of extortion, labor racketeering, and murder for hire.
They were all convicted, and they all were sentenced to basically 100 years in prison.
The verdict removed the top leadership of the Lucchese family from the streets and marked the end of an era.
This new generation of bosses was a bit more aggressive. They are really street thugs.
Today, it's an organization that garners headlines and stiff convictions, hardly worthy of the low-profile mobster who revolutionized racketeering.
If Tommy Lucchese could arise from the grave and come back today, I think he would be absolutely stunned and happy. Castellano learned at the feet of the greatest organized crime leader that ever existed.
Paul Castellano wasn't a real gangster. Paul was a businessman.
When Paul became the boss of the Gambino family, there was a tremendous rip from day one.
This guy's sitting there in this robe with his open slippers in his big white house, and he's taking every dollar we got.
And he was very greedy. When he took over the family, he wanted everything.
John Gotti said, he's useless. Well, let's get rid of him. He, in effect, wrote a death warrant for himself.
Long Island, New York, January 1983. Roy DeMeo, a made member of the Gambino crime family, said goodbye to his son and left home in his Cadillac.
I knew beforehand that my father's days were numbered. I started bargaining with God, saying, please just let him come home tonight.
Roy DeMeo had made a name for himself as the enforcer for Gambino boss Paul Castellano. DeMeo also earned huge profits from pornography and auto theft rackets. But DeMeo had been subpoenaed to testify about the Gambino auto theft ring. And Castellano made an executive decision. DeMeo had to go. When DeMeo didn't return home that night, Albert figured his father was on the run.
I had a plan set up with him. If he didn't show up at home, it was the beginning of him going into the wind, going on a lamb.
Following the plan, Albert waited patiently for his father to make contact.
I didn't want to report him missing because I wanted to give him lead time. So that was the plan. And then finally, I reported him missing.
We had an alert out with the police department to look for that Cadillac.
8 days later, the cops finally tracked down DeMeo's caddy in a Brooklyn parking lot and discovered that DeMeo hadn't made it into the wind.
When we popped the trunk, the first thing we saw was the curled up body of Roy DeMeo.
Castellano next thing we know, Mr. Dineo was found in his trunk with bullet holes in his head.
It was a testament to Castellano's clout as one of the mob's most powerful bosses. Constantino Paul Castellano was born in the Bensonhurst neighborhood of Brooklyn, New York in 1915. His parents, Giuseppe and Concetta, had immigrated from Sicily a few years earlier.
Bensonhurst in those days was the next rung on the immigration ladder for the Italian immigrants. It was considered a middle-class suburban community.
Giuseppe landed a good job as a butcher. But the father of three also joined a small-time side racket with mob ties, selling illegal lottery tickets to Italian immigrants. The lottery, called La Rosarito, provided some of the necessary capital for the mob to branch out into more serious and violent rackets. Not much of a student, Paul dropped out of school in the 8th grade and started training as a butcher. But he also learned the ropes of his father's side business.
Paul's first flirtation with organized crime was to help his father on the lottery.
Running around for his pop gave Castellano a glimpse into criminal life. He liked what he saw. His father's blood-soaked apron paled in comparison to the expensive suits worn by gangsters. In Paul's young mind, his career choice was obvious. In 1930s New York, old-world mobsters were dying out, and a new breed of gangster was taking over.
They were Americans. And in their view, what would make organized crime work was a combination of Sicilian mores with modern American business methods.
And during the height of Prohibition, business was booming. One of Paul Castellano's cousins was a maid member in La Cosa Nostra named Carlo Gambino.
Carlo Gambino was a tough guy growing up. He was not afraid to use his hands.
As Paul began slowly to drift into organized crime, he began to cross paths with Carlo. Carlo was an up-and-comer in the organization.
By 1934, Paul Castellano was 19 and took to wearing the sharp suits he admired. Working for his father, both as a butcher and a hustler, allowed him to afford the finer things in life. At 6'2", Big Paul was ready to make a name for himself. Over the July 4th weekend, Castellano and two buddies drove to a party in Connecticut. Along the way, they stopped off at a clothing store, but shopping was the last thing on Paul's mind. He wanted to rob the joint.
They told him, this is going to be easy. It's like taking candy from a baby.
Castellano pulled a pistol from his glove compartment, and the three young men entered the store. Paul brandished the pistol to the owner, relieving him of the $51 in his wallet. Castellano and his two partners rifled through the cash register, but found nothing. It wasn't the big payday Paul
Went off to prison uncomplainingly, got out after 3 months, and discovered he was suddenly a hero in the neighborhood.
Local mob leaders praised Castellano for not ratting on his friends, and his cousin, Carlo Gambino, took notice.
That's when Carlo Gambino said, "You belong in the organization."
Gambino had established himself as a business-savvy earner for one of the top 5 underworld crime families, the Manganos. Everything he touched turned to gold. When he was promoted to captain, he brought young Paul Castellano under his wing, introducing him to the business side of organized crime.
Carlo Gambino wanted his cousin not to be involved in the dirty work that, the other guys could do for us.
The two men worked together, expanding their gambling scheme. They were about to forge even closer ties. In 1937, Paul married his childhood sweetheart, Nina Mono, a pretty girl from the neighborhood. She was also Carlo Gambino's sister-in-law. By the 1950s, Castellano was a hard-working father of four. He took what he learned from his cousin Gambino and developed a successful meat distribution company called Blue Ribbon Meats.
Paul thought in terms of a businessman. Some of his loan shark customers owned butcher shops, and they couldn't pay. Now, the standard routine at the time was, you can't pay, you're going to need a new set of knees. But Paul said, well, why would you do that? Instead, he would take a piece of the business.
In the early 50s, Paul's cousin, Carlo Gambino, was rewarded for his shrewd business style. A capo named Albert Anastasia had muscled his way to the top of the Mangano family and eventually appointed Carlo Gambino his underboss. Gambino was now second in command. He used his new position to promote his cousin, Paul Castellano, to captain. But Gambino wasn't happy being number two, and he joined with other mobsters to plan Anastasia's demise.
So Carlo began political maneuvering, and he began to undercut Albert Anastasia, and before we knew it, there was a murder plot.
On October 25th, 1957, Anastasia entered a Manhattan barbershop for a shave. While relaxing in the chair, his head covered in towels, gunmen burst in and shots rang out. 5 bullets riddled the mob chief's body. A dazed Anastasia lunged at the assassin's reflections in the barbershop mirror before falling to his death.
It was the assassination of Anastasia that led to Carlo Gambino rising to the top of that crime family.
With Anastasia out of the way, Gambino became the de facto head of the Manganos, and his cousin Paul was right by his side.
Paul Castellano was the right-hand man, so he prospered as Carlo prospered, and he went wherever Carlo went.
Things were looking up for Castellano. He had a happy family, a successful business, and a spot near the top of New York's most powerful crime family. But he would hit a bump in the road when the cops crashed a party of the mafia's elite.